Tonight, you will discover a powerful secret that Buddhist monks have used for centuries to quiet the restless mind and find deep, meaningful rest. This is not just a story. It is an invitation to a journey inward, a gentle unfolding of peace that has the power to transform both your mind and body. So, make yourself comfortable. Adjust your pillow, settle your body into a place of ease, and let your muscles soften. Feel the weight of your body pressing gently against the surface beneath you. Take one deep, slow breath with me now. Inhale fully, feeling the air fill your lungs, and then exhale softly, releasing any tension you might be holding. As you begin to relax, allow this moment to simply be what it is. There is no need to change anything. Just your breath, just your presence, just peace. And before we settle in more deeply, if this space brings you a sense of comfort or quiet joy, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps us continue creating moments like these. Only if it feels right for you. No pressure ever. And if you'd like, take a moment to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. There's something beautifully connecting in knowing we are all pausing together across time zones across the world, united in stillness. As you settle in, allow yourself to simply be here. There is no need to rush or fix anything. Doubts and distractions may arise, but that is natural. Let them come and go like passing clouds, always returning your attention gently to this space of calm. Tonight's stories and teachings will softly guide you to a place where the mind can rest and the heart can open. We will explore 15 timeless Zen stories each, a small lantern lighting the path to deeper understanding, compassion, and tranquility. These stories are not just ancient tales. They are living lessons inviting you to see your own life with fresh eyes. By the end of this journey, you may find your thoughts quieting, your breath deepening, and a sense of gentle peace blossoming within. Let curiosity and openness be your companions as we move slowly together, step by step, through these moments of reflection and insight. There is no hurry. Each story is a gift wrapped in the stillness between words, waiting patiently for you to unwrap it. Now let's begin with our first story, a simple tale of awakening and calm that invites you to meet yourself exactly where you are. The first story, The Still Pond. Long ago, nestled in a quiet valley where the hills rolled gently like ocean waves, frozen in time, and the trees whispered secrets to one another. With every passing breeze, there was a village unlike any other. It was a place where life moved slowly, where birdsong was more common than conversation, and where the rhythm of nature guided the hearts of its people. In this serene corner of the world lay a small hidden pond. The pond was not grand or wide. It was humble and perfectly shaped, cradled by stones, smoothed by years of rain and moss. Its waters were so still, so undisturbed that they mirrored the heavens above with startling clarity. When clouds passed overhead, their reflections floated upon the surface like ghostly sails. At night, the moon dipped low and danced on the water, and the stars looked down as if peering into a mirror of the cosmos. Trees surrounded the pond in a gentle protective ring, their branches dipping low as if bowing in reverence to its stillness. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, a lone traveler arrived. His robes were dusty, his shoulders slumped from the weight of many days on the road, but heavier still was the burden in his heart, the tangle of thoughts, regrets, longings, and questions that had followed him like shadows through every village and every mountain pass. He had been seeking something, though he did not know what. Answers, perhaps. Peace. Or maybe just a place to rest. He approached the pond, slowly drawn to its stillness like a moth to moonlight. He sat down at the edge, letting his legs fold beneath him, and leaned forward, gazing into the water. What he saw there startled him. Not just the sky, not just the arching trees, but his own reflection. His face looked drawn, his eyes restless, as a soft breeze stirred the surface. Ripples distorted his image, turning his features into waves of confusion. His breath caught. It was as though the pond could see into him. Just then, a monk appeared. An old man in simple robes. His steps light, his presence calm. He had lived nearby for many years, often walking this path at dusk. Seeing the traveler lost in thought, he approached and sat beside him without a word. They shared a few moments of silence, listening to the breeze rustle the leaves, the soft splash of a frog jumping into the water. Then the monk turned gently and asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, "What do you see when you look into the pond?" The traveler hesitated, then said, "I see the sky, the trees, but I also see myself. And I don't like what I see. My face looks restless. My mind feels like these ripples, never still." The monk nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. The pond reflects clearly only when it is still. So it is with the mind. When thoughts disturb it, clarity fades. But know this, just as you cannot stop the wind from stirring the water, you cannot stop thoughts from arising. The practice is not to stop the wind. It is to watch the ripples with compassion and to let them settle. The traveler closed his eyes for a moment. He listened to the wind moving through the trees, to the quiet beating of his own heart. He took a breath, then another, deep, slow, gentle. Each exhale seemed to carry away a small piece of the heaviness inside him. The ripples on the water slowed, and in time, so did the ripples in his mind. He stayed like that for some time, breathing and watching. Slowly, the image in the pond became clearer again. The sky, the trees, even his own face no longer twisted with tension, but relaxed still like the water itself. The monk did not speak again. He simply sat with the traveler, sharing the silence, letting the stillness do its work. This story, like the pond itself, offers us a reflection. Your mind, too, holds the power to reflect peace, clarity, and truth, but only when you allow it to be still. The restless thoughts, the doubts, the regrets, they are like wind. They will come, but you need not chase them or push them away. Simply observe. With time they pass, and the stillness beneath returns. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." And this is where your journey begins, not with control, but with presence. Not with force, but with kindness toward your own experience. But how do we apply this in our lives, in the chaos of daily routines and relationships? Imagine this. You're waiting in a long line at the doctor's office. You've had a stressful morning. Traffic was heavy. Your knee is aching. And the person behind you keeps sighing loudly, clearly, impatient. Normally, this might trigger your frustration. Your thoughts start to churn. Why is this taking so long? Why do I always have to wait? Why can't people be more patient? This is the ripple on the pond. In that moment, remember the teaching of the still pond. Instead of reacting, pause, breathe. Imagine the scene as it is without needing to change it. Yes, the line is long. Yes, your knee hurts. Yes, the person behind you is sighing. But like the monk said, the wind cannot be stopped. You can, however, choose not to add more waves by resisting what already is. You take a breath. You feel the tension ease from your shoulders. You give a soft smile, not because the situation changed, but because you have chosen not to be carried away by it. Or think of this. A loved one says something harsh. Perhaps unintentionally, perhaps not. Your heart tightens. Old wounds rise. You feel the impulse to defend yourself, to respond sharply, to prove your point. But you pause. You remember the pond reflects clearly only when still. You step away for a moment. You breathe. You ask yourself, what am I really feeling? Is this pain from now or from something deeper? You choose silence, or perhaps you respond, but with softness instead of anger. Later you realize the moment passed like a wave, and by choosing stillness, you protected your peace and preserved the relationship. This is the practice of mindfulness in action, not in monasteries or temples, but in grocery stores, kitchens, living rooms, and waiting rooms. The mind, when trained gently and lovingly, becomes like that pond, reflective, spacious, and at peace. The Buddha likened the untrained mind to a wild elephant swayed by every sound and movement. But with calm observation, we slowly teach that elephant to stand quietly, to listen, to breathe. You might try this now. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Picture a pond deep within a quiet forest. The sun is setting. The air is cool and calm. Watch the surface of the water. Is it still or does it ripple? Can you let it ripple without judgment? Can you allow your breath to settle like leaves falling softly on its surface? With each breath, imagine the water becoming a little clearer, a little calmer. And as the pond becomes still, your mind does too. You are not trying, you are simply being. You can return to this image anytime when you're overwhelmed, when emotions swell, or when the world feels too loud. Remember, you don't need to change the wind. You only need to watch the ripples and let them settle. This is the beginning of mindfulness. This is the beginning of peace. There is no goal, no destination, only presence. Only this moment, which is enough. The hills had quieted. The wind, though still moving among the trees, seemed more like a whisper than a rush. As we step deeper into this tranquil journey, let us turn now to a story that speaks to the very heart of resilience. One not built from hardness or defense, but from the quiet strength of yielding. Let me tell you the story of the bamboo and the oak. In a lush forest far to the east, where mist rises like breath from the earth each morning and birds sing before the sun appears, there lived an old oak tree and a grove of young bamboo. The oak stood tall, its thick limbs stretched wide, casting a mighty shadow across the ground. Its bark was rough, hardened by decades of sun, wind, and rain. Nearby, the bamboo swayed gently with every breeze, its slender stalks bowing and rising in rhythmic motion, never still for long. The oak often looked down on the bamboo and scoffed at its movement. "Why do you bend so easily?" it asked one morning as the wind rustled the canopy. "Have you no backbone? No strength?" "I stand tall and unmoving, rooted and proud." The bamboo swayed softly and replied, "Perhaps it is not weakness, but a different kind of strength." The oak chuckled deeply and turned its gaze upward. "We'll see." Time passed. Seasons turned. One evening, dark clouds gathered. The sky roared with thunder. A fierce storm descended upon the forest. The wind howled, tearing through leaves, bending branches. Rain poured down in thick sheets, and the earth trembled with the storm's fury. The oak, true to its pride, stood firm. It clenched its limbs and resisted with all its might. But the wind was stronger. With a crack that echoed through the forest, the mighty oak's trunk split, and it collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash. When morning came and the light filtered through silver clouds, the forest was still. Birds emerged once more. The bamboo, soaked and low to the ground, slowly rose again with the sun. It had bent with the wind, but it had not broken. This story is one of contrast and deep wisdom. On one side stands the mighty oak, proud, solid, unmoving. It represents that part of us that clings to the belief that strength means resistance, that to survive we must brace ourselves, hold firm, and never waver. In our modern world, we are often taught that to be strong is to keep our composure at all costs, to be productive, no matter what, to never ask for help, to push through, no matter how exhausted or overwhelmed we may feel. But the oak, for all its strength, breaks when the storm is too fierce. And on the other side, we find the bamboo's slender light swaying freely in the wind. It may appear fragile at first glance, but its true power lies in its grace. Its ability to bend without breaking, to yield, without giving in, to survive by flowing with the forces around it, rather than resisting them. The bamboo shows us another kind of strength, one that comes from deep trust in the rhythm of life, from surrender rather than struggle, from softness rather than hardness. It teaches us that resilience is not the absence of difficulty, but the ability to stay open and present even when life is uncertain. The Buddha once taught attachment is the root of suffering. We often interpret this as referring only to material things, but one of the deepest, most subtle attachments we carry is the attachment to who we think we must be. Strong, in control, unshakable. But the truth is, life is not always gentle. Suffering arises, illness comes. We lose loved ones, our plans fall apart, the ground shifts beneath us. And when we try to remain like the oak, rigid, tight, and unwilling to bend, we often create more pain for ourselves. We resist the storm, and in that resistance, we crack. So how do we live like the bamboo? It begins with a shift not in what happens to us, but in how we respond. Imagine this real-life moment. You lose your job unexpectedly. At first, your mind reels. There's panic about bills, about identity, about the future. You feel anger, fear, sadness all at once. Your instinct may be to grasp at something, anything, to fix it, to restore control. But what if instead you allowed yourself to bend? You acknowledge the fear. You let yourself grieve not just the job, but what it represented. You talk with a trusted friend. You breathe deeply even as your heart races. Slowly you begin to notice things you hadn't seen before. A hobby long neglected, a quiet desire to try something new. A job posting that unexpectedly excites you. Step by step, you rise not the same as before, but perhaps wiser and more aligned with what truly matters. Or picture this. You're a caregiver for someone you love. It's a quiet kind of exhaustion, the kind others don't always see. Some days you feel like you're unraveling. The dishes are piled up. The medication schedule is overwhelming, and guilt whispers in your ear every time you take a moment for yourself. You tell yourself you must hold it all together, that you can't rest, can't cry, can't falter. But what if you let go of that story? What if you bowed to the weight, just a little like the bamboo bows to the wind? You make a cup of tea and allow yourself to sit. You cry if the tears come. You text a friend not to vent, but just to say, I need to hear a kind voice. You take a walk even for 5 minutes. You forgive yourself for being human. In doing so, you don't collapse. You don't fall apart. You find a quiet strength within, the kind that doesn't shout but endures. Or even something simpler, a difficult conversation, a moment of misunderstanding, a sudden disappointment. These are the everyday wins. You feel the urge to push back, to prove, to defend. But instead you take a breath, you pause, you listen, you stay soft. And the moment passes not by force, but by grace. In all these examples, resilience is not about having power over life. It's about being in harmony with it. It is not found in clenching your jaw and muscling through. It's in allowing yourself to bend, to flow, to adapt, without losing the essence of who you are. This is not weakness. This is wisdom in motion. Bamboo does not resist the storm, it dances with it. And when the winds die down, it stands again, tall in its own way. So the next time you feel the winds of life pressing against you, remember this story. Picture the oak, picture the bamboo, and ask yourself gently, not with judgment, but with compassion. Am I resisting, or am I allowing? Am I clinging, or am I flowing? Am I trying to control, or am I trusting? Let yourself bend, and when the storm passes, as all storms do rise, again softer, stronger, wiser, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself as bamboo in the forest. A wind begins to blow. Feel your body bend with it, not resisting, not fearing, but flowing. Your roots are deep. Your heart is flexible. The wind may be strong, but you are stronger still, not because you push back, but because you move with life. Breathe in and feel the wind. Breathe out and return to center. Breathe in and bend. Breathe out and rise. You are not broken. You are swaying. You are not weak. You are enduring. Each breath is a bow to the present moment. In our culture, we are often taught that strength means to stand our ground, to fight, to be unshaken. But in Buddhist practice, the strongest people are not those who never fall. They are those who fall and rise again, who greet pain with gentleness, who find flexibility in the midst of difficulty. As you go about your day or lie in bed tonight, consider where in your life are you trying to be the oak, and what might happen if you allowed yourself to be the bamboo. You may find that a softness arises, a kindness toward yourself, a new kind of strength, one that bends and yet never breaks. For now, let the image of the bamboo remain in your mind, swaying, breathing, rooted yet ever moving. Let it remind you that peace is not the absence of storms, but the ability to move with them. As the wind quiets and the bamboo sways gently once more in your mind's eye, let us now turn toward another essential lesson in the Zen tradition. It is a lesson about openness, humility, and the willingness to learn a teaching that reminds us we must sometimes empty ourselves before we can be truly filled. Let me tell you the story of the empty cup. There once was a young man full of ambition and cleverness who had studied philosophy and religion in great detail. He had read hundreds of books and written many essays. He was well respected among his peers and deeply confident in his knowledge, but still a quiet unrest stirred within him. There were questions he could not answer, a sense that something was missing, something not found in words or theories. One day, he heard of a renowned Zen master who lived in a quiet monastery on a misty mountainside. The young man traveled far to meet him, determined to gain wisdom that would complete his understanding. When he arrived, he bowed respectfully and asked to be accepted as a student. The Zen master greeted him with kindness and invited him to tea. As they sat together on a wooden porch overlooking the mountains, the master began to pour tea into the young man's cup. The cup filled quickly, but the master did not stop. The tea rose to the brim, then spilled over the edge, dripping onto the young man's robes, then the floor. Startled, the young man exclaimed, "Stop, the cup is full. No more will go in." The master paused, smiled gently and said, "Exactly. You are like this cup, so full of your own opinions, assumptions, and knowledge that nothing new can enter. If you truly wish to learn, you must first empty your cup." In Zen, this is one of the foundational teachings, Shoshin, or beginner's mind. It is the practice of approaching each moment not with the hardened certainty of accumulated knowledge, but with the open curiosity of a child encountering something for the very first time. In Shoshin, we release the need to master, to label, to already understand. We arrive with soft eyes and quiet hands, prepared to learn not just from teachers and texts, but from silence, from mistakes, from breath itself. The empty cup, then, is not a symbol of ignorance or lack. It is a sacred vessel of readiness. It is the inner spaciousness that allows wisdom to be poured in, not dripped through the cracks of arrogance or ego, but received fully, humbly, and with wonder. So often, though, we walk through the world carrying cups not only full, but brimming, filled with stress, fears, assumptions, stories about ourselves and others, beliefs about who we must be. Stories we've told ourselves for years: I'm not good enough. People like me never succeed. I already know how this ends. These beliefs swirl through our minds like old tea gone cold, leaving little room for anything new to enter. We rush from task to task, clinging to schedules fueled by comparison and urgency. Our minds grow noisier by the hour, and then we wonder, why can't I feel peaceful? Why does everything feel so heavy? But how can calm enter when we leave no space for it? How can wisdom speak when the room is filled with our own voice? A cluttered mind, like an overfilled cup, cannot receive anything new until it makes space. And that space is born from stillness, from humility, from letting go. The Buddha once said, "In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true." We build these lines of separation within ourselves, between what we think is right and wrong, worthy or unworthy, familiar or foreign. We defend these borders like fences around a small garden, believing that only what grows inside is valid. But truth, like the sky, is vast. It cannot be contained, and it enters us most freely when we are willing to loosen our grip on what we think we know. What if we allowed ourselves to set down those distinctions, even for a little while? What if we let go, not permanently, but just enough to see things differently? What if we release the need to be right, to fix, to prove? What if we allowed silence to speak and uncertainty to guide? Imagine you're having a conversation with someone whose values clash with yours. Their ideas make you bristle. Maybe it's a family member or a friend or someone online. Instantly, your mind begins forming judgments, rehearsing comebacks, fortifying your position. Your cup is flooding. But what if in that moment you paused? You listened not to reply, not to win, but simply to understand. You didn't have to agree. You didn't have to change your mind, but you made space. And in that space, something soft emerges, compassion perhaps, or simply the peace of not needing to carry the weight of defensiveness. Or perhaps you're entering a new phase of life. Retirement, a fresh job, a healing process, a spiritual path. You may feel disoriented, uncertain. Your instinct might be to fill that void immediately with plans, with schedules, with books and answers. But what if you waited? What if you let that emptiness be fertile instead of frightening? What if you let life show you something new before you tried to define it? Even in meditation, beginner's mind matters. Maybe you've been sitting for years, or perhaps this is your first week. Either way, every breath is new. Every session is a chance to start again, not to perfect your practice, but to simply meet yourself as you are. No expectation, no judgment, just you, your breath, and the gentle presence of an empty cup waiting quietly to be filled. And remember this, in Zen, we don't empty the cup just once. We do it again and again, like clearing the garden before planting anew. Every morning, every conversation, every quiet moment. Letting go, not because we are lost, but because we are open. The greatest wisdom often arises not from knowing, but from not knowing, from the humility of emptiness. That is where the deepest listening begins. That is where peace has room to enter. So the next time you feel your cup filling with assumptions, with noise, with certainty, pause, tip the cup, watch what flows out. Let go of just enough to receive something new. You may be surprised by what enters the space you make. Close your eyes and imagine holding a simple ceramic teacup in your hands. Feel its shape, its weight. Imagine that it is full brimming, not with tea, but with your thoughts, your beliefs, your stress, your plans. Now gently tip it, let it pour out. Watch as the liquid empties slowly, one breath at a time, one release at a time. You are not losing anything. You are making room. Now feel the lightness of the empty cup, the readiness, the possibility. This is your mind, clear and open. We live in a culture that often rewards the full cup, the person with all the answers, the endless stream of productivity, the packed schedule. But in Zen, we are invited to remember the beauty of space, the wisdom of not knowing, the profound peace that arises when we allow ourselves to be empty, and in that emptiness, deeply receptive. What might you let go of even for just this evening? What belief, what burden, what thought? You don't have to throw it away forever, just set it down beside you like a teacup on the table. Let it rest. Let yourself rest. Because when we are empty, we are ready to be filled with wonder, with clarity, with peace. And now, as the steam from the tea fades into the mountain air, we prepare to hear another story, a paradoxical question that cannot be answered by the mind, but only felt by the heart. A question that breaks the walls of logic and opens the gates of awakening. Stay with me as we journey into the sound of one hand. A long time ago, in a monastery nestled high in the misty mountains of Japan, a young monk sought enlightenment with all the intensity of a flame. His name was Hiroshi. Every morning he rose before the sun. He swept the temple floors with reverence, tended to the garden with care, and sat in deep meditation for hours on end. And still he felt something missing, a veil between him and understanding, something he could not name yet could not ignore. One day, the master gave Hiroshi a koan to meditate on a kind of Zen riddle, designed not to be solved by logic, but to break through the limits of the thinking mind. The koan was this: what is the sound of one hand clapping? At first, Hiroshi was puzzled. He clapped both hands together, then tried clapping one against his chest. He snapped his fingers, rubbed his palm on the wall, but every effort only made him feel more confused, more lost. He returned to the master frustrated. "I don't understand," he said. "There's no sound. One hand cannot clap." The master only smiled. "Return to your cushion," he said gently, "and listen more deeply." And so Hiroshi sat. Day after day, he listened not to sounds in the air, but to something deeper. He let go of trying to figure it out. He stopped searching for answers with his mind and began opening his awareness instead. Until one morning, as he watched a single autumn leaf fall in silence, something shifted. In that moment of stillness, something inside him let go. The question dissolved. There was no answer. And yet he understood, not with words but with his whole being. This is the essence of the Zen koan. It is not a riddle to be solved, nor a clever trick to outwit the mind. It is not meant to lead you to a conclusion. It is meant to lead you beyond your need for answers, beyond the comfortable territory of logic, beyond the familiar terrain of words and reason. A koan is a mirror one that reflects not your face but the shape of your mind. It shows you the limits of intellect, then invites you gently, quietly, to step past those limits into something deeper, into direct experience, into pure presence. In the West, we are often taught to value certainty. We prize clarity, structure, explanation. From an early age, we learn that to not know something is a weakness, that confusion is failure, that questions must be answered and problems must be solved. We are trained to think our way through life as if thought alone could untangle every mystery. But Zen whispers something different. Zen reminds us that not everything true can be spoken, that the deepest realities like love, death, beauty, awakening cannot be grasped with the mind. They must be felt. They must be lived. And sometimes they can only be approached through silence. The koan, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" is not an absurd question. It is a doorway. The moment your rational mind tries to answer it, falls short. And that falling short, that gap between what you can think and what you can sense, is the very point. It's an invitation to stop reaching and start listening. The sound of one hand is not something your ears can catch. It is a stillness between breaths, a pause so pure that it reveals the sacredness beneath all sound. It is the moment when the storm of thoughts finally slows, when the noise of expectation and effort dissolves, and what remains is awareness itself, wordless, boundless, alive. The Buddha once said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." But in the space of a koan, even one word may be too much. Because sometimes peace is not spoken, it is remembered. It is recognized like something you've always known, but forgotten in the hurry of thinking. Let's bring this home. Let's bring this into your everyday life. Have you ever stood by the bedside of someone you love in their final moments, or held the hand of a newborn child? There is nothing to say in those moments. No logic can capture the fullness of what is felt. And yet it is the most real you have ever been. Or think of those times you've sat beside the ocean or under a sky painted with stars, and for a moment your mind stopped naming, categorizing, interpreting. You didn't think the beauty, you felt it. You were simply there, completely present, entirely still. That's the sound of one hand. Or imagine you are grappling with a major life decision. You've filled notebooks with lists. You've asked advice from friends and read articles online. You've circled the same questions again and again, and yet the answer still escapes you. The more you try to think your way through it, the more tangled it becomes. The noise in your head becomes deafening, and then perhaps out of exhaustion you stop. You go for a walk. You sit quietly in the early morning light. You breathe. You let your thoughts soften. You stop grasping, and in that quiet a feeling begins to rise, not an answer in words, but a knowing, a sense, a truth that doesn't explain itself but feels right. That is the sound of one hand. Or even something more ordinary, standing in line at the grocery store, waiting in traffic, brushing your teeth. So much of our suffering comes not from the moment itself, but from the mental chatter layered on top of it. We are always somewhere else in our minds, rehearsing, remembering, resisting. What if in one of those small moments you simply paused, took one breath, dropped into your body, let the mind go quiet? You don't need to name the stillness or explain it. Just feel it. That, too, is the sound of one hand. This teaching is not about abandoning thought, but about remembering that thinking is only one tool among many. When you set it down, even briefly, you open yourself to an entirely different kind of wisdom, one that lives not in the head, but in the heart, one that arises not in the noise, but in the spaces between. So the next time you find yourself grasping for answers, caught in the spiral of overthinking, pause. Sit, breathe. Ask yourself gently, what is the sound of one hand? Then listen, not with your ears, but with your being. And if you hear nothing, you are closer than you think. Try this now with me. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath in and out. Now imagine holding your hand in front of you. Feel its weight, its warmth, its stillness. Ask yourself, what is the sound of one hand? Don't try to answer. Just sit with the question. Feel the tension rise, the mind wanting to solve, to speak. Then breathe again and let it go. Just notice. Be here. There is no answer to find, only presence to return to. This koan and others like it are meant to shake us awake, not with noise, but with silence, not with more ideas, but with less. They are invitations to feel your way into reality instead of thinking your way through it. As you go through your day, see if you can notice moments when your mind is reaching for answers. Ask yourself, can I pause here? Can I let the question simply be? You may find that peace doesn't always come from solving things, but from surrendering to the mystery. And now let's carry this stillness forward into our next story, a simple tale of a farmer and a horse, and how the things we label good or bad may not be what they seem. But before we move, take one more breath. Let it be slow. Let it be deep. And listen just for a moment for the sound of one hand. In a quiet village surrounded by rice fields and low rolling hills, there lived a farmer known for his calm demeanor. He did not speak much, but those who knew him often remarked on the peace that seemed to follow him like a gentle breeze. He tended to his land with steady hands and rose each morning with the sun. One day, his only horse, a strong, beautiful creature that helped him plow the fields, broke through the fence and ran away into the hills. The villagers came to offer sympathy. "Oh, how unfortunate," they said. "Such bad luck." The farmer simply nodded and replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." A few days later, the horse returned, but not alone. With it came 3 wild horses from the mountains, strong and untamed. The villagers were amazed. "What incredible fortune," they said. "You are so lucky." Again, the farmer said softly, "Maybe so, maybe not." The next week, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses. He was thrown violently to the ground and broke his leg. The villagers gathered once more. "Oh, what terrible luck," they murmured. The farmer, without alarm, said again, "Maybe so, maybe not." Soon after, the army came to the village to conscript all able-bodied young men for war. Many families wept as their sons were taken, but the farmer's son with his broken leg was left behind. The villagers shook their heads in disbelief. "You are truly fortunate," they said. The farmer only smiled and whispered, "Maybe so, maybe not." This story has been told in many cultures, in many forms. Sometimes it's about a horse, sometimes a flood, sometimes a king or a beggar, but the heart of its wisdom is always the same, a quiet invitation to pause before we judge, a call to humility in the face of the unknown. In Zen, we are encouraged to resist the mind's impulse to label everything instantly as good or bad. Instead, we are taught to sit with the unfolding, to wait patiently as life reveals its meaning, not all at once, but slowly, moment by moment, like the petals of a lotus opening in its own time. The mind loves certainty. It wants to package every experience, to wrap it in a label, to categorize and control. But reality is rarely so simple. Life moves in currents deeper than we can see. Events that feel like disasters may in time become the doorway to healing or growth. And things we once celebrated may reveal themselves later to have hidden costs. The wisdom of Zen doesn't lie in escaping life's changes, but in riding them with grace. It invites us to look beyond immediate appearances and remember we never see the whole picture. The Buddha once said, "Events happen, deeds are done." There is no individual doer thereof. This may sound strange at first, almost like a denial of responsibility, but it is in fact a profound recognition of how complex and interconnected life truly is. Every event is the result of countless causes, some stretching back generations, others invisible to the eye. No single moment stands alone, and when we truly understand this, we begin to release the burden of having to make sense of everything right away. We begin to trust the unfolding. When we stop resisting life, when we loosen our grip on how things should be, we begin to touch something deeper than control. We begin to move in rhythm with the world, not against it. We begin to flow. Imagine you lose a job you love. The security is gone. The identity you've built begins to crumble. It feels like failure. Fear creeps in. You imagine the worst. But a month passes, then two. And one day, you find yourself in a new role, one you would have never imagined for yourself, more aligned with your values, more suited to who you're becoming, not who you were. What felt like loss becomes transformation. Or perhaps you miss an important flight. There's frustration, delay. You're forced to cancel meetings, reroute your plans. But in that extra hour waiting in a quiet airport cafe, you strike up a conversation with a stranger, a kind soul. Someone who tells you exactly what you needed to hear, even if they'll never know it. A passing moment, but somehow everything feels different afterward. Sometimes life interrupts us not to punish, but to redirect, to slow us down so we might see more clearly. Even illness, which can feel like a betrayal of the body, can carry unseen blessings. It may force you to rest, to reevaluate, to listen inward. It may deepen your compassion for yourself, for others. It may bring you closer to what matters most. Stillness, family, gratitude, spirit. Of course, none of this is to pretend that pain isn't real. The farmer's son still broke his leg. There was hardship. There were consequences. Acceptance is not denial. It is the courage to meet life as it is rather than as we wish it would be. It's saying yes even when the heart aches. It's opening to the possibility that what looks like misfortune now may become something else entirely over time. When we stop clinging to a narrow view, this is good, that is bad, something inside us relaxes. A deep breath returns. We stop fighting with reality. We stop trying to control the wind, and instead we adjust our sails. We let life carry us not blindly but wisely with presence. Because the truth is, we don't always know what anything means, not fully. Sometimes we need more time. Sometimes we need more silence. Sometimes we need to stop asking why and start saying maybe so, maybe not, and let the river of life flow on. Bring to mind something in your life that didn't go the way you wanted. Maybe a plan that fell apart, a door that closed, a loss. Feel it without judgment, acknowledge it, breathe with it. Then ask yourself, do I know the full story yet? Is it possible that something unseen is still unfolding? Don't rush to answer. Just sit in the quiet. Let the possibility of a wider view open gently in your heart. Like the farmer, can you learn to say, maybe so, maybe not, and allow life to reveal its meaning in its own time. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means loosening the mind's grip on how things should be and beginning to meet life as it is, without resistance, without haste. It means understanding that the river of life does not need us to paddle upstream, that often our peace lies in floating. When you stop deciding what each moment means, you begin to live it. You begin to listen. You begin to trust. And in that trust, you may find, like the farmer did, that peace is not the result of perfect circumstances, but of a mind that rests in things just as they are. But before we go, pause, breathe, feel the current of life beneath your thoughts, and let it carry you gently onward. You followed the quiet path of the farmer, stepping gently through the teachings of acceptance and surrender. Now we arrive at another deep truth, a teaching that offers not only insight, but liberation from a form of suffering we all know too well, the kind we inflict upon ourselves. Tonight we listen to one of the Buddha's most compassionate parables, a story not of judgment, but of understanding, a gentle lesson in how we meet pain and how we can choose peace even in the face of life's inevitable challenges. This is the teaching of the two arrows. One quiet afternoon, beneath the wide shade of a sal tree, the Buddha gathered with his disciples. The air was warm and fragrant. Birds sang softly in the branches overhead, and the ground beneath them was cool and earthy. A monk approached the Buddha, his expression troubled. "Master," he asked, "why do we continue to suffer, even when we try to let go of our attachments? Why does pain still cling to us even after we've walked the path for so long?" The Buddha looked into the monk's eyes and replied not with a lecture, but with a story, simple and clear. Imagine, he said, that a man is walking through the forest, and suddenly he is struck by an arrow. It pierces his skin, and he cries out in pain. This is the first arrow. It is real, it is sharp, and it hurts. This kind of pain is part of being alive, whether through illness, loss, aging, or the changes that life brings. No one can avoid the first arrow. But now imagine that same man with the arrow still in his flesh begins to shout, "Why did this happen to me? Who is to blame? Will I ever heal? Why wasn't I more careful?" He becomes angry. He blames himself. He blames others. He imagines the worst. He tightens around the pain. This is the second arrow. It is the pain we create in our minds through resistance, fear, judgment, and storytelling. The first arrow is life. The second arrow is suffering. And unlike the first, the second arrow is optional. This story is one of the Buddha's most elegant and liberating teachings. With just a few lines, he invites us to see something that often goes unnoticed in the blur of daily life: the subtle but profound difference between pain and suffering. A difference so small it can pass beneath the surface of our awareness, yet so great it can shape the very quality of our lives. Pain is inevitable. It is part of the human experience. Our bodies ache with age, illness, and effort. We lose those we love to time, to distance, to death. We experience rejection, failure, disappointment. Things we cherish break. Dreams dissolve. Life changes direction without asking our permission. These are the arrows life shoots at all of us. They are real, and they hurt. But the second arrow, that is the one we unknowingly fire into ourselves. Not with our hands, but with our thoughts, our judgments, our refusal to let go. The mind, desperate to control what cannot be controlled, creates a storm. We take a moment of pain and build stories around it. I should have seen it coming. Why did this happen to me? These inner voices sharpen the wound. A single moment of discomfort becomes an entire landscape of fear. A simple misfortune becomes a heavy identity. We replay conversations that can't be changed, trying to revise the past. We anticipate future pain before it has even arrived, exhausting ourselves in advance. We turn temporary emotion into permanent suffering, not because we're weak or broken, but because we haven't yet learned a gentler way. But once we do see this pattern, once we become aware of the second arrow, we also glimpse something beautiful, a door to freedom, because while we may not be able to avoid the first arrow of life, we can learn to stop firing the second, and that changes everything. Imagine this. You wake one morning with a sharp pain in your knee. It wasn't there yesterday. The pain is real, the first arrow. Your body is asking for attention, but your mind begins to react. What if this never heals? What if I can't walk properly again? What if this is the beginning of something worse? Why does my body keep failing me? You haven't moved, and yet suddenly you're overwhelmed not just by physical discomfort, but by waves of anxiety and helplessness. The pain has multiplied, not from your knee, but from your mind. The second arrow has landed. Or consider this: a friend doesn't return your call. Hours pass, then days. There's a brief natural pang in your chest, the first arrow. But then your thoughts arrive. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they're avoiding me. Maybe I'm not important to them anymore. You begin scrolling through past conversations, analyzing every detail. The sting of absence becomes a spiral of self-doubt. The pain grows. This is how we suffer, not only from what is, but from what we tell ourselves about what is. Now imagine another way, one rooted in mindfulness, in awareness, in compassion. You wake with knee pain. You pause. You breathe. You feel the ache fully without bracing against it. You place your hand gently on your knee. You speak to yourself softly. This is pain, and I can care for it. You stretch slowly. You rest. You don't predict disaster. You just meet what's here. Or your friend still hasn't called. You feel the sadness arise, but you don't build a story. You breathe. You say to yourself, I don't know why, but I choose not to assume. You send them warmth in your heart, and then you go make a cup of tea. You let it be. No blame, no spiraling, no added suffering. Do you feel the difference? One path constricts, the body tenses, the heart closes, the breath shortens, the world feels small and hostile. The other path expands, the body softens, the breath deepens, the heart opens. You remain present, responsive, free. This is not about denial. It's not pretending that pain doesn't exist. The Buddha never said we would be spared pain, but he did teach that suffering, the kind we create through resistance, can be softened, even let go of, and in that letting go, a new space opens. A quiet, compassionate space where healing can begin, where peace becomes possible, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer fighting what is. Close your eyes. Bring to mind something that hurt recently, a moment of discomfort, a harsh word, a worry, a disappointment. Gently ask yourself, what was the first arrow here? What actually happened? Now ask, what was the second arrow? What story did my mind create? Notice how your body feels as you explore this, and then take a breath. On the inhale, say silently, this pain is real. On the exhale, and I choose not to suffer twice. Let yourself rest here for a moment in the calm that arises when you stop fighting reality and begin holding it with compassion. The Buddha's teaching does not deny pain. It embraces it. It says, yes, life will bring difficulty, but you don't have to add more. You don't have to punish yourself. You don't have to turn pain into suffering. Awareness is your shield. Kindness is your medicine. Let these be the tools you carry when the next arrow comes, because it will come, but this time perhaps you won't fire the second. Before we go, take one more breath. And in that breath, feel what it's like to let the second arrow fall away, unheard, untouched. Now we turn to something much smaller, something so ordinary, so simple, that we often miss its quiet power: a cup of tea. This next story reminds us that true mindfulness, true presence, does not require grand rituals or distant temples. It only asks that we arrive fully into this moment, into this breath, into this sip. This is the story of a cup of tea. There was once a Zen master named Rutan, known for his wisdom and quiet discipline. He lived in a small temple, deep in the mountains, where he taught a handful of students who sought to understand the nature of the mind. One day, a scholar came to visit him, a man of great intellect who had studied philosophy, religion, and metaphysics. He had read countless books and held strong opinions on what was true and what was not. He believed he already understood the essence of Zen, but had come for confirmation from the master. Rutan welcomed him and invited him to sit on the porch overlooking the garden. The air was cool and the leaves rustled gently in the wind. I have studied many schools of thought, the scholar said, and I believe I now grasp the truth of Zen, but I would like to hear your thoughts as well. Ryutan said nothing. He simply nodded, rose, and brought out a pot of tea. Slowly he began to pour into the scholar's cup. The tea rose steadily. It reached the brim, but Ryutan did not stop. The tea spilled over the edge, onto the saucer, onto the floor, onto the scholar's robes. Master, the scholar cried, the cup is overflowing. No more will go in. Ryutan stopped pouring. He looked at the scholar and said quietly, just like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and conclusions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? This story, often told in Zen circles, is not only about humility, it is also about presence, about the power of truly being here in this moment, not lost in the mind's noise, not reaching ahead or grasping behind, but rooted like a stone, resting in a riverbed, calm and undisturbed. In the story, tea is more than a drink. It becomes a ritual of awareness, a ceremony of the now, a sacred gesture of full attention, a moment where the burden of the past falls away, the fog of the future lifts, and only what is remains: the heat radiating from the cup, the fragrant scent rising with the steam, the quiet sound of water cascading into porcelain like a soft rain in a temple courtyard. In Zen, this is where the gate to enlightenment stands, not in distant mountaintops or moments of grandeur, but right here within the folds of the ordinary. Enlightenment, we are reminded, is not reserved for the exceptional. It is hidden in the humble, found in the breath you're taking now, in the sip you might take later, in the steps between rooms, the sound of birdsong outside the window, the way light plays across your hands. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." At first glance, these words seem simple, even obvious, but lived fully, they open the door to liberation. They remind us that life only ever happens now. Everything else, the regrets, the plans, the what-ifs, is mental smoke. This breath is real. This moment is alive. Yet so often we are not where we are. Our bodies may be seated at the table, but our minds are halfway across town. We scroll through our phones as meals grow cold. We nod while someone speaks, but are already rehearsing our response. We walk through beautiful places and never see them. Because we're caught in the echo chamber of thought, we chase time. We collect moments only to rush past them. We forget that the present moment is not a stepping stone to something else. It is the destination. Zen calls us back, again and again, to now, to here. Let's bring this into our lived experience. Imagine yourself at home. Perhaps it's a quiet morning or a soft moment after dinner. You place a kettle on the stove. You listen to the gentle rumble as the water begins to heat. You open a tin of tea, chamomile, jasmine, oolong, or whatever your heart longs for. You inhale the leaves, not quickly, not absent-mindedly, but deeply with appreciation. You place them in your cup, pour the hot water, and watch as color unfurls like smoke in the glass. Now pause. Don't rush. Let the ritual breathe. Feel the warmth rising toward your cheeks. Notice how your fingers wrap around the ceramic, how the heat seeps into your palms. Observe the way the steam curls and disappears. Smell the earthy floral notes that drift toward you. No detail is too small. No sensation unworthy of your attention. Before you sip, take one conscious breath. Let the world slow down. Let your shoulders soften. Let the to-do list fade like dust in the wind. Now you take a sip. Not while multitasking, not while reading an email, but with full attention, as though this sip were the first you'd ever taken. You feel the warmth travel through your throat. You notice the taste on your tongue. You become still. In that moment, you are not performing mindfulness. You are mindfulness. You are not thinking. You are being. This is meditation. This is presence. This is the truth Zen keeps pointing to, that peace doesn't come from having less to do or more silence or perfect circumstances. It comes from doing what you're already doing, fully, with care, with attention, with heart. And the beauty is, you don't need a special cushion. You don't need incense or a retreat in the mountains. You don't need to be good at meditation. You just need to be here. Washing a dish can be a meditation. Folding laundry can be a sacred act. Listening to someone truly listening without drifting can become a profound spiritual practice. You only need to arrive where you already are. So let the next cup of tea or glass of water or slice of fruit or breath be more than routine. Let it be a door. Let it be enough. Try this with me now. Close your eyes. Imagine a cup of tea in your hands. It's just been poured. Feel its warmth. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. Now take a breath in as if sipping from the cup, and exhale feeling it settle inside you. Inhale, feel the aroma of peace. Exhale, let go of thought. With each breath, you drink in the present moment. With each exhale, you release distraction. This is tea as meditation, breath as ritual, stillness in motion. You may not always have time to sit in formal meditation, but every act can become a meditation if you bring your full attention to it. Washing dishes, tying your shoes, listening to someone you love. The key is not what you do, it is how you do it. With presence, with care, with awareness. Zen reminds us, when walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. Above all, don't wobble. A cup of tea, when taken mindfully, becomes a teaching. It shows us that the moment is always enough, that joy is hidden in the simplest places, that peace is never far. It is here, now, in your breath, in your hands, in your life. Let the next time you make tea be a small ceremony of coming home to your body, to your senses, to the quiet truth that this moment is all there is and it is complete. But before we go, take one more sip in your mind or from your cup. Let it warm you, let it ground you, let it remind you peace is already here. As we continue walking this gentle path, let us now turn inward toward the deeper layers of perception where things are not always as they appear. In Zen, we are reminded again and again the way we see is not the same as what is. Just like a reflection rippling in water, the world we experience is often shaped by our beliefs, assumptions, and fears. Tonight's story invites us to soften our gaze, to look more deeply, to see not just with the eyes, but with the heart. This is the story of the moon in the water. There once was a young monk named Akio, quiet and devoted, who had spent many years at a mountaintop temple. He was disciplined in his practice, diligent in his studies, and respected by his peers. Yet beneath his peaceful demeanor was a restless longing, a desire to grasp the true nature of reality, to see things as they really are. One evening after evening meditation, Akio went to fetch water from the temple's pond. The moon was full and luminous, hanging low in the sky, casting a silver path across the dark surface. As he knelt to draw water, he paused and looked into the pond. There, shimmering in the still water, was the reflection of the moon, perfect and whole. For a moment, Akio was overcome with awe. He felt the beauty of the moment deeply, but then he reached out his hand almost without thinking to touch it. His fingers stirred the surface. The reflection broke. Startled, he watched the ripples scatter the moonlight into fragments. The image that had looked so solid, so real, was gone. Disheartened, he returned to the temple and told his master what had happened. The old Zen master listened patiently, then smiled. "You did not touch the moon," he said. "You only touched its reflection. What you saw was not the moon itself, but the image projected onto the surface. The truth is not disturbed by ripples. Only the illusion is." The master looked into Akio's eyes and added, "If you wish to see clearly, learn to still the water." This story offers a gentle yet profound insight into how the mind truly works and how easily it mistakes appearance for truth. Just like the moon reflected on the surface of a pond, much of what we perceive in life is not reality itself, but a reflection filtered through the waters of our consciousness, through layers of memory, emotion, past experiences, and unconscious conditioning. In Zen and Buddhist philosophy, this illusion is often called Maya, not illusion, in the sense of something fake, but in the sense of something misperceived, a distortion of what is. Our thoughts ripple the surface of the mind, and like the wind over still water, they create a moving image fascinating to look at, but ultimately misleading. The water of the mind is rarely still. It is stirred constantly by judgments, habits, unhealed wounds, old fears and desires we've carried for years. And when the surface is disturbed, what we see is no longer clear. We look at the world, at others, at ourselves, and we see not with calm understanding, but through anxiety, assumption, and old stories we've mistaken for truth. We believe a passing look means disapproval. A short message means anger. A quiet room means rejection. The mind fills in the gaps with meaning, often meaning that wounds us more deeply than reality ever could. The Buddha taught, "With our thoughts we make the world." And indeed, so much of our pain does not come from events themselves, but from how we interpret them. The mind we bring to each moment creates our experience of that moment. If the water's cloudy, even the moon looks broken. But here is the beautiful truth that Zen offers again and again: we can learn to still the water. We cannot stop the wind from blowing, but we can stop chasing the ripples. We can learn to let things be, to breathe, to wait, to return to the center. You receive a short message from someone you care about, brief, distant, perhaps missing its usual warmth. Instantly, your thoughts ripple the surface. What did I do wrong? Are they upset with me? Are they pulling away? Did I say something I shouldn't have? The heart tightens. The mind spins. You feel rejected, anxious, unsafe. But a day later, they explain they were overwhelmed, distracted, or simply tired. And suddenly your whole inner narrative dissolves. The pain wasn't in the message. It was in the story you created about the message. Or perhaps you pass someone on the street or in the hallway, someone you know, and they don't smile. They don't make eye contact. The ripples begin. Did I offend them? Are they ignoring me? Do they not care? And the mind builds a tower of suffering atop a single neutral moment. But perhaps they were just deep in thought. Perhaps they were grieving something they couldn't speak of. Perhaps they simply didn't see you. The reality was never threatening. It was the reflection that frightened you. And yet we do this again and again, reacting not to life, but to the illusion cast by our own restless minds. But imagine another way. Imagine you notice the ripples as they begin. You receive the message. You feel the sting. You take a breath. Instead of reaching for meaning, you lean back. You watch. You wait. You allow space. You say gently to yourself, "This may not be what it seems." Or the person passes you by without acknowledgement. Your mind begins to race, but you pause. You smile inwardly. You breathe. You remind yourself, "I don't know their story. I don't need to make this about me." You don't suppress your emotions. You don't deny your instinct, but you don't feed the ripples either. You allow the pond to still, and when it does, the moon returns. You realize it was never lost. Only its image was shaken. The truth, the reality was always there, waiting beneath the surface. To live this way is not to deny emotion. It is to meet life with a quiet, spacious mind. One that doesn't rush to conclusions. One that can hold uncertainty with grace. One that recognizes that inner peace does not come from controlling the world, but from learning how to see it clearly. And clarity arises not from thinking more, but from thinking less. From seeing what is instead of what we fear it might be. So the next time a moment arises that unsettles you, a glance, a silence, a pause, see if you can wait. See if you can breathe. See if you can watch the ripples instead of becoming them. Because when the mind is still, the heart can see. And what it sees is often far kinder than the illusion we had believed. Close your eyes. Imagine a still pond deep in the forest. A full moon hangs above, glowing in the night sky. Now look down into the pond. See the moon's reflection. It is beautiful, yes, but it is not the moon. Now imagine a thought enters an anxious ripple. The image distorts. Another thought, another ripple. You do not reach to fix the water. You simply breathe. Let the thoughts pass. Let the surface return to stillness. Now once again the moon shines clearly. But this time you are not fooled. You know the truth is not in the water. It is above. It is beyond. It is what remains untouched, unmoved. In Zen, the practice of meditation is this exact process. Sitting, watching, letting the mind settle. Not controlling the thoughts, but not attaching to them either. Allowing the ripples to soften until the surface becomes clear. And in that clarity, we begin to see the world and ourselves as they truly are. So the next time you feel disturbed by someone's words or afraid of a thought or caught in judgment, pause. Ask yourself, am I looking at the moon? Or just its reflection? And then let the water still, because peace like the moon has never left. It's simply waiting to be seen. Now take one last breath here. Feel the pond stilling in your own mind. Feel the light of clarity returning. And with that, we will walk softly into the next story, a reminder of the healing power of true listening and the peace that arises when we offer our full presence to another. This is the story of the Zen master and the guest. In a quiet Zen temple tucked among flowering trees, a master was known not only for his wisdom, but for his silence. Many traveled from afar to sit with him. Some came with questions. Some came with confusion. Some came just to be near the stillness he carried like a soft wind surrounding him. One day a man arrived, an ordinary man carrying nothing but a worn bag and the weight of his own story. He asked if he could speak with the master, and the monks led him to a small room where the master sat cross-legged beside a pot of tea. The guest bowed and began to talk. He shared his troubles about his broken family, his uncertain work, the loneliness that followed him like a shadow. He spoke without holding back. Sometimes he wept, sometimes he fell silent, and all the while the master sat beside him, listening, not interrupting, not advising, not fixing, just listening. The man spoke for over an hour, then paused and looked up expecting words of wisdom. But the master simply refilled his tea and handed him the cup. In the silence between them, something shifted. The man's shoulders relaxed. His breath deepened. And for the first time in a long time, he felt seen, not judged, not pitied, simply held in presence. He bowed again, eyes wet with gratitude, and whispered, "Thank you. You've helped me more than you know." This story is a quiet but powerful teaching in the art of compassionate listening, a practice as vital to Zen, as meditation, as integral as breath. While meditation turns us inward, listening turns us outward, connecting us heart to heart, breath to breath. In Zen, to listen deeply is not merely a kindness, it is a form of love, a sacred offering, an act of presence so profound that it can heal wounds too deep for words. In much of the modern world, especially in the West, communication is often measured by how well we speak. We're taught to value eloquence, argument, persuasion, self-expression. We are encouraged to project, to influence, to explain. But rarely are we taught the other side of the conversation, the side that is quiet, still receptive, the kind of listening that empties itself to make room for another's truth. Zen gently reminds us that the deepest healing does not always come from what is said. It often comes from what is felt, from the simple act of being fully seen and heard without judgment or interruption, from the calm presence of someone who says not in words but in energy, "You don't need to be different to be welcome here." The Buddha once said, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete." And yet he also showed us again and again that compassion is not confined to self-care. It flows outward through the quiet acts of daily life, through attention, through patience, through the gentle art of listening, truly listening, not just with the ears, but with the whole being. To listen in this way is to create a sanctuary. It is to open a space where another can arrive as they are without fear of correction or dismissal. It is not to solve, to analyze, or to advise. It is not to think of your reply while they are still speaking. It is not even to agree or disagree. It is simply to hold space, like a mirror that reflects the other without distortion, like a bowl that receives without spilling. When was the last time you truly felt heard? Not just politely listened to, but understood in that rare, quiet, sacred way. Perhaps it was your mother sitting beside you on a sleepless night. Perhaps it was a friend who let you cry without offering a single solution. Perhaps it was a teacher who looked you in the eye and made you feel seen for the very first time. Whoever it was, they probably didn't say much. They probably didn't have perfect words, but their silence was not empty. It was full. It held you. It honored your experience. It gave you space to be. That moment didn't need brilliance. It didn't need advice. It was healing simply because someone was there with you without distraction or judgment. Fully present. Now think of the last time you offered that kind of presence to someone else. Was it easy? Or was your mind tempted to jump ahead to offer your thoughts, your stories, your interpretations? Our minds are wired to react, to fix, to solve, to compare their story to ours. But when we pause, when we resist those urges and simply be with another, we create something rare in today's world, a moment of true connection. Even just 1 minute of undivided quiet attention can change someone's day, can change someone's heart. You don't need to be a therapist. You don't need spiritual credentials. You don't need to have the right words. You only need to be still. You only need to care. You only need to show up and say with your eyes, with your breath, with your patience, "I am here. I'm not rushing you. I'm not fixing you. I'm just with you. That is listening. That is Zen. That is compassion in its most immediate human form. Close your eyes. Imagine someone you care about sitting across from you. They begin to speak, but you are not there to give advice. You are not there to correct them. You are only there to listen. Feel your body become still. Your breath soften. Your attention deepen. You are a bowl empty open receiving. You are the teacup from earlier ready to be filled. Let the words come. Let the pauses come. Let the emotion come, and let yourself remain still. In this space, you are not a fixer. You are not a judge. You are simply present, and that is enough. Now imagine bringing this practice into your everyday life. You're with a friend, and they begin to share something difficult. You feel the urge to jump in, to soothe, to redirect, to explain. But instead, you breathe. You listen. You hold their words like fragile leaves. You let them land softly. Or a child tells you about something they fear. You don't dismiss it. You don't rush to solve it. You sit beside them and say, "Tell me more." Or perhaps you offer this same listening to yourself. You sit in silence and let your own voice rise. You don't argue with your feelings. You don't push them away. You say, "I'm here. I hear you." This is how we become a sanctuary, not just for others, but for ourselves. Zen teaches that the mind becomes calm when we stop chasing, and the heart becomes kind when we start listening. So let the next conversation you have, whether with another or with yourself, be one filled with space. Let your listening be a cup of warm tea. Let it hold. Let it receive. Let it heal. But before we move on, take a breath. Feel yourself listened to. And remember, you are worthy of being heard. And you are capable of listening with love. In Buddhism, death is not seen as a failure of life, but as a natural continuation of its flow. Yet this truth doesn't erase the pain of loss. It simply helps us hold that pain with compassion. The story you are about to hear is one of the most beloved and human teachings from the Buddha's life. It's a story of heartbreak and healing. This is the story of the mustard seed. Long ago, during the time of the Buddha, there lived a young woman named Kisa Gotami. She was kind and gentle with a soft voice and a loving spirit. She married young and gave birth to a beautiful son whom she adored with all her heart. For a while, her life was full of light each day, colored by laughter, warmth, and the joy of watching her child grow. But one day the child fell ill. His breathing became shallow. His skin grew cold, and before long he died in her arms. Kisa Gotami's world collapsed. She could not accept what had happened. Her mind refused to believe it. Her arms clung to the lifeless body of her son, as though sheer love could bring him back. Grief made her eyes wide and wild. She walked through the village, carrying her child, begging anyone who would listen, "Please help me. My child is sick. He needs medicine." People turned away in sorrow. Some avoided her. Others pitied her, whispering among themselves. They knew the truth, but Kisa could not bear it. At last someone took compassion and said, "Go to the Buddha. Perhaps he can help." She found the Buddha sitting beneath a tree surrounded by disciples. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with tears. She knelt before him, placed the child's body at his feet, and cried out, "Please, my Lord, my child is sick. You can heal him. I've heard of your powers. Please give me medicine." The Buddha looked at her with deep love but said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke gently. "Yes, I can help. But first I need a special ingredient, a handful of mustard seeds. Bring them to me from a home that has never known death." Kisa Gotami's eyes lit with hope. She bowed, lifted her child once more, and hurried to the village. She went from house to house asking for mustard seeds, and in every house she was offered some. But when she asked, "Has death ever visited here?" the answer was always the same. "Yes," they said, "we lost a brother. Yes, our mother passed last winter. Yes, we have buried a child too." And so it went all day and into the night. She knocked on dozens of doors, received many mustard seeds, but not one came from a home untouched by death. As the moon rose and the wind grew still, something shifted inside her. Her feet, once frantic with purpose, slowed. Her eyes softened. Her arms, once clutched around the lifeless body of her child, began to release. She looked down and for the first time saw what had always been true. Her son was gone, and so she sat beneath a tree, the same kind of tree where the Buddha had first awakened. She wept, not in denial now, but in surrender. Her grief was still there, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a storm, it was a river. She returned to the Buddha the next day, empty-handed but open-hearted. "I could not find a home untouched by death," she said softly. The Buddha nodded. "You have now begun to understand. Life and death walk hand in hand. Grief is not a punishment. It is part of love." This story is one of the most tender, most human in all of Buddhist teaching, because it meets us in a place where sooner or later we all find ourselves in loss. Whether it's the sudden death of someone we love, the quiet end of a relationship we had once believed would last, the fading of long-held dreams, or the slow, silent passage of youth and vitality, grief arrives, sometimes like a wave, sometimes like a whisper, but always eventually it comes. It crosses every threshold. It sits at every table. Grief, like love, is a universal language. No home, no heart is spared its visit. And yet in the early hours of grief, as Kisa Gotami shows us, we so often feel isolated by it, cut off, as if our sorrow is uniquely unbearable, as if we have somehow been singled out by fate. We ask, why me? Why now? What did I do to deserve this? The first arrow, the event itself, lands hard, but then in our resistance, we fire the second we blame ourselves. We replay the moment. Endlessly, we cling to what can no longer be. We try to undo the irreversible. We grieve not only the loss, but the loss of our imagined future. But as Kisa walked from house to house, gathering mustard seeds and hearing stories of other families touched by death, a quiet truth emerged. She was not alone. Her pain, though sharp and personal, was also part of something larger. Her grief joined a river that had been flowing through humanity since the beginning of time. Everyone carries something, a name they no longer speak aloud, a room that sits undisturbed, a letter they cannot throw away, a birthday that now brings more silence than celebration. When we look deeply, we find that every heart has known some breaking, and strangely beautifully, it is this shared experience that begins to soften the edges of our sorrow. The Buddha, in his great compassion, never promised to take the pain away. He did not bring the child back to life. What he offered instead was something more enduring, the ability to carry pain without being broken by it. The wisdom to hold grief not as a failure, but as a sacred part of being human. To see death and change not as punishments, but as part of the vast unfolding mystery of life. Think back to a time when you experienced loss. Maybe it was recent and raw. Maybe it was long ago, but still lives quietly in your body. Perhaps it was the loss of a person, or perhaps it was something less visible. A home, a friendship, a sense of certainty. Take a moment to breathe with it, not to relive the suffering, but to offer it kindness. What was your first reaction? Did your mind scream, "This can't be real"? Did your heart bargain? If only I had done this, maybe it would have been different. Did you find yourself pretending just for a while that everything was still okay? Maybe like Kisa Gotami, you tried to fix what could not be fixed. And then what happened? Over time, did something begin to change? Maybe your grief began to soften, not because the pain was erased, but because something within you expanded. Maybe you began to notice the small joys again. A bird's song. A hand held a sunrise that reminded you life was still continuing gently, insistently. Maybe you discovered that grief was not your enemy. It was just love transformed. Because that is the quiet truth hidden inside sorrow. Grief is love with no destination. Love that can no longer give itself in the same way. And so it becomes tears. It becomes silence. It becomes prayer. It becomes the ache in your chest when you remember their voice, their laughter, their presence. It is not weakness. It is not failure. It is the final devotion we offer to what was once precious, a kind of sacred bow to what we can no longer hold. And when we allow ourselves to feel it, Not rush it, not fix it, but simply sit with it. It begins slowly to shape us. Not in the way trauma carves sharp lines, but in the way rivers carve valleys gently over time, creating space for depth, for compassion, for wisdom we would not have known otherwise. Grief held gently becomes a teacher, and you in your quiet willingness to feel it become its student and its healer. Try this reflection now. Close your eyes. Picture someone or something you've lost. Let them come gently to your mind. Not in panic, not in desperation, just in quiet memory. Feel whatever arises. Let your breath move slowly. Place your hand on your heart and whisper silently or aloud, "You are deeply loved. You are still part of me. I carry your light." Let the grief be a river now, not a flood. Let it move. Let it be honored. This is not about letting go of the one you lost. It is about letting go of the story, that you shouldn't feel what you feel. In Zen, grief is not the opposite of peace. It can become peace if held gently, if allowed to breathe, if met with presence instead of resistance. Kisagotami didn't lose her sorrow, she transformed it into wisdom, into compassion, into the understanding that nothing is truly separate, that even loss connects us to others, that even pain can become a doorway to awakening. Rest here a little longer, with your breath, with your memories, with your heart. You are not alone in your grief, and you are not broken by it. You are being shaped, softly, deeply, into someone who understands. Grief has a way of humbling us. It shows us what truly matters by gently or sometimes suddenly removing what we thought we could not live without. And in that space of emptiness, another question often arises. What do I really want? After loss, after letting go, the heart begins to search again for meaning, for direction, for something that feels enough. In Zen, one of the great teachers of peace is not silence or even suffering, but desire. Not because desire is wrong, but because of the way it leads us endlessly away from ourselves. The next story speaks directly to this. It begins with longing. It ends with something much deeper. This is the story of the stonecutter's wish. There once was a humble stonecutter who lived a simple life. Every day he would climb into the mountains with his tools and break stones from the face of the cliffs. The work was hard. His hands were rough and cracked. His back ached. Yet he never complained, not until one day when he was called to deliver a stone to the home of a rich merchant. When he entered the merchant's grand estate, full of silk cushions, gold ornaments, and shaded courtyards, the stonecutter felt something stir within him. For the first time, he thought, "How fortunate this man must be. He has no need to sweat in the sun. He doesn't worry about food. He is powerful. I wish I were such a man." To his astonishment, in that very moment, his wish was granted. He found himself no longer a stonecutter, but the merchant dressed in fine robes, seated in comfort, admired by all. But soon, he noticed that even the merchant bowed before the prince who passed through the village in a golden chariot, flanked by guards. People lined the streets, shouting praises, and the new merchant thought, "This prince is more powerful than I. I wish I were him." And again his wish was granted. He was now a prince riding in splendor, feared and respected. Yet as he rode, the sun beat down on him. The heat was relentless. He could not escape it. He looked up and thought, "The sun is more powerful than I. It touches everyone. I wish I were the sun." And he became the sun, radiant, blazing, covering the world with heat. He was mighty until one day a cloud passed between him and the earth, casting a shadow. He thought, "The cloud is greater than I. It blocks even the sun. I wish I were the cloud." So he became a cloud floating high, covering the skies, bringing rain and shade. But then he noticed something strange. No matter how much he poured down, there was something unmoved beneath him. The mountain, tall, immovable, silent. The mountain is the greatest of all, he thought. I wish I were the mountain. He became the mountain, massive, ancient, unmoving, until one morning he felt a sharp pain in his side, a tapping, a chipping away, and there at his base stood a simple man with a chisel and hammer, a stonecutter. This story is a timeless parable about the nature of desire, how it endlessly moves within us, like the wind always whispering. That fulfillment lies just ahead, just beyond the horizon of now. Desire doesn't shout, it seduces. It points subtly and persistently to something other than what we have, other than what we are. It suggests that peace exists elsewhere, in another job, another relationship, another version of ourselves. And so we chase. The stonecutter believed that peace would come from becoming something greater, more powerful, more admired. He imagined happiness lived in transformation if only he could become someone else, somewhere else. But with every wish fulfilled, he found only new discomforts, new pressures, new comparisons. The robes of the merchant were beautiful, but they could not shield him from envy. The prince had power, but not immunity from heat. Even the sun, the greatest of all, was still blocked by the cloud. And so he longed again, over and over. The chase continued, not because peace was elusive, but because he looked for it in things that cannot provide it. Around and around he went, until at last he came full circle back to where he had begun. Back to simplicity. Back to the hands that once held the hammer and chisel. And in that return, he saw what had always been true, that the strength he had admired in others was already in him, that his quiet life had never lacked meaning. That contentment isn't about becoming more, it's about seeing more deeply into what already is. Zen does not condemn desire, it understands it. It acknowledges that to be human is to want to grow, to reach, to explore. But what causes suffering is attachment to desire, the belief that our peace is conditional, that we cannot rest until the longing is fulfilled. That happiness lives in the future, never here. This illusion keeps us running. It turns life into a treadmill, each goal achieved quickly, replaced by another. Desire says almost, you're close, just a little more. And so we overlook the richness of what we already hold. The Buddha said contentment is the greatest wealth, not because it prevents growth, but because it frees us from the delusion that growth alone will save us. In Zen, we are reminded again and again, the one who is content with little is never poor, because they have discovered the quiet joy of enoughness. Let's gently bring this home into your own life. What do you find yourself chasing these days? Is it more time? More recognition? More clarity? A different body? A more peaceful mind? There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow, to evolve, to improve. But pause and ask gently, do I believe that peace waits on the other side of this goal? Do I believe that rest, worthiness, or love will begin only when this changes? That belief that conditional peace is the whisper of the stonecutter's wish. Now imagine something radical, just for a moment. Imagine that nothing had to change. Not your body, not your bank account, not your relationship, not your past. Imagine that this moment, this breath, this cup of tea, this quiet heartbeat is enough, not because it is perfect, but because it is real, because it is here. Notice how your body responds to that idea. Does something soften in your chest? Or does something inside resist clinging to the familiar rhythm of striving? Whatever you feel, let it rise. Let it be. Let it speak. You are allowed to want. Desire will come and go like the weather, but you are also allowed to rest from wanting. You are allowed to pause in the middle of the race and say, this is enough. I am enough. Even if just for a breath, even if just for this moment. And in that sacred pause, you may feel something stir, something quieter than desire, but deeper than satisfaction. You may feel peace, not the peace of arrival, but the peace of presence, the kind that was never far at all. Try this practice now. Close your eyes, take a slow breath in, and a long breath out. Now bring to mind something you've been longing for, a change, a result, a future state. Feel it in your chest. Now gently say to yourself, I see you, desire. I understand why you're here. And then take another breath and whisper, but for now, this is enough. Let yourself settle into that space, not forever, just for now. Let the chasing stop and feel the peace that arises when you stop needing to become anything at all. Zen does not ask us to kill desire. It only asks us to see it clearly, to bow to it, and then to choose not to be dragged by it, but to sit beside it, to let desire pass like wind through tall grass, while you remain steady-rooted like the mountain. Because the stonecutter did not find contentment by becoming everything else. He found it by returning home, to himself. But before we go, take one last breath, and in that breath, let the chasing rest. Here in this stillness, you are already whole. By now, you've walked through the valleys of longing, grief, perception, and presence. You've touched the calm of a single breath and the ache of the second arrow. And now we turn to a different kind of challenge, the noise that surrounds us. Not just the noise of busy streets or crowded rooms, but the inner noise, the distraction, the chatter, the endless stream of thoughts, notifications, worries, and comparisons that fill our modern lives. Is peace still possible in such a world? Zen says yes, not by escaping the noise, but by learning how to hear the silence within it. This is the story of the silent bell. In a quiet village nestled between forested hills and winding rivers, there was an ancient Zen temple known for its great bronze bell. The bell suspended in a wooden tower was said to carry the purest sound in the world. When rung, its tone would echo across the valley, softening the hearts of all who heard it. Travelers often paused in their journey just to listen to it once. But one year, a great storm came. The wind tore through the village. Trees fell. The temple roof was damaged and the bell's wooden frame cracked. Though the bell itself was unharmed, the monks were unable to ring it again. The mechanism had broken. The bell became silent. At first, villagers lamented the loss. It's not the same without the sound, they said. The silence is empty. But over time, something unusual began to happen. People still came to sit beneath the bell. They sat in silence. They listened. And in that deep quiet, they began to hear something else. Not the bell's tone, but the stillness inside themselves. The bell had stopped ringing, but its purpose remained. It had become not a sound, but a space where inner silence could be remembered. In our lives, the world rarely, if ever, goes quiet. The modern world especially is a chorus of constant noise bells that never stop ringing, both literal and metaphorical. Alarms buzz us into the day. Phones vibrate in our pockets, begging for our attention. News flashes across screens. Notifications stack up. Voices rise online in our homes, in our own minds. Responsibilities press in from every side. Expectations tighten like a rope around the chest. Our minds are pulled outward again and again, scattered across 100 worries and 1,000 tasks. We are rarely just here. Instead, we are caught in a loop. What we need to do next, what others expect of us, what we think we're falling behind on, and what disaster might be waiting just beyond the horizon. Even in moments of physical stillness, the inner noise continues. Chatter, rumination, loops of self-criticism, replayed conversations, imagined futures. The noise follows us into sleep and meets us the moment we wake. And so we often say, sometimes aloud, sometimes just silently to ourselves, if only things would calm down. If only the world would get quieter, if people would need less, if I had more time, if I could go somewhere peaceful, then I could finally find peace. But Zen gently, radically flips the equation. It doesn't wait for the world to grow quiet. It asks, what if peace isn't something you find when the noise ends, but something you uncover within it? What if the noise isn't the enemy? What if the storm outside doesn't have to dictate the weather within? What if stillness is not something we build, but something we return to, something that was never missing in the first place? The Buddha lived in a noisy world too. His teachings weren't born in a vacuum of perfect conditions. There were markets buzzing with trade, the cries of children, the urgency of hunger, the presence of political tension and war. Yet he taught, and more importantly, he lived the understanding that the human mind, when trained through attention and gentleness, can become still anywhere. Like the surface of a pond, it does not require the wind to stop. It only needs to stop reacting to every breeze. In other words, we don't wait for silence to be still. We become still and discover the silence within us. Let's bring this into your own experience. When was the last time you felt truly deeply still? Not just physically still sitting or lying down, but mentally quiet. A moment where the usual tide of thoughts receded and something spacious and soft rose up inside. It might have been brief, Perhaps during a sunrise when the sky blushed into gold and you didn't think about what was next. Or during a walk beneath the stars when the vastness above made the smallness of your worries fade. Or perhaps it came in the sacred hush just before sleep when the world around you paused, and for a flicker of time, your mind did too. What you likely noticed in those moments was this silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of struggle. The world might still have been loud, but something inside you stopped reaching, stopped resisting, stopped trying to control. And in that letting go, something beautiful appeared. That was your silent bell. That is the quiet you are always searching for, not somewhere far away, but already within you. Not a place, not a result. A state of being that arises when you stop chasing calm and instead allow it to meet you right where you are. Try this now. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath in and out. Now imagine a great bronze bell, tall, ancient, unmoving. You stand beside it. You place your hand on its cool, curved surface. It does not ring, but you do not need it to. You sit beside it. You close your eyes. The world continues. Voices, movement, thoughts. But you begin to notice the space between the sounds. You begin to feel the silence beneath the noise. You are not escaping the world. You are remembering the stillness that lives inside you. That has always lived inside you. Zen teaches that inner peace isn't something we add, it's something we uncover. It's what remains when we stop grasping, stop reacting, stop expecting the world to fall silent before we allow ourselves to relax. The bell no longer rings, and yet its presence still quiets the heart. So too can your presence become a bell for others, a calm energy, a settled breath, a mind that listens instead of rushes. You don't have to eliminate all noise to live in stillness. You only have to stop being pulled by every sound. When the noise comes, breathe. When the thought spins, pause. When the world rushes, slow your steps. You are not the bells ringing. You are its stillness. But before we move on, listen, not for a sound, but for what is already here beneath it all. Your stillness, your center, your silent bell. And now we move into a teaching that gently but powerfully dismantles one of the deepest sources of suffering, ego. Ego is not arrogance. It is not pride in the usual sense. In Buddhism, ego is the idea of a fixed self, a solid I that must be defended, maintained, and separate from others. And it is this idea that gives rise to blame, to anger, to judgment. But there's a story, a quiet, windswept story that shows us another way. This is the story of the empty boat. Once there was a monk who lived on the edge of a vast, peaceful lake. He would row out each morning at dawn to sit in the center, surrounded by water and silence, letting the soft rocking of the boat still his thoughts. One morning, as the mists still curled across the surface, he took his small wooden boat out as usual. He closed his eyes and began to meditate, breathing in the stillness. But suddenly there was a jolt. Another boat had collided with his own. His eyes flew open and anger surged within him. Who would be so careless, he thought? Who disturbs this silence? He turned sharply, ready to confront the other person, but the boat was empty. No one was there. The boat had simply drifted on the current, carried by the wind. And in that moment, the monk realized the source of his anger was not the collision, but the assumption that someone had wronged him. The moment he saw the boat was empty, his anger vanished. There was no one to blame. He laughed softly to himself, and in that quiet laughter, he awakened. This story, like many Zen teachings, offers us not just an answer, but a mirror. A soft, clear mirror held up to the restless mind. It gives us a chance to see ourselves not with judgment, but with deep honesty. It asks us to look gently at the patterns we carry, the stories we tell, the ways we mistake pain for punishment. It shows us how quickly the mind fills in blanks. Someone hurt me. Someone should have known better. Someone must be blamed. Someone must answer for this. We do this instinctively. The moment something or someone bumps into our peace, we want to know who is responsible. We look for the face behind the pain. We assign motive. We build a whole narrative around a single moment of impact. It becomes personal, emotional, heavy, but in truth, most of the time the boat is empty. There is no villain, no personal attack, just the wind and current of someone else's pain moving through the world, colliding with ours. People are drifting in their own weather, caught in storms of insecurity, trauma, exhaustion, unmet needs, blind habits, and buried fear. They act out not because they wish to cause harm, but because they cannot yet see clearly. They react not with wisdom, but from their own wounds. And yet, when they crash into us, we believe it means something about who we are. We take it in, we hold it close, we let it shape our sense of self. We build an identity around the bruise. But Zen asks us to pause, to soften, to wonder. What if this isn't about me at all? What if the pain you felt wasn't retribution, but a ripple from someone else's suffering? What if those harsh words, those careless actions, those silences that stung, what if none of it reflected your value? What if their behavior wasn't a mirror of your worth, but simply the weather of their own unawakened mind? What if the boat was empty? Think of a time when someone hurt you. Maybe it was something recent, a look, a word, an absence. Maybe it was long ago, but it still lives somewhere in your body. Perhaps a betrayal, a promise broken, a connection that crumbled. Now gently notice what your mind did in response. Did it build a story? Did it say they knew? They wanted to hurt me. They didn't care. They never valued me. And maybe sometimes those stories are true. Maybe the pain was intentional. Maybe someone did act from unkindness. But also, maybe not. Maybe they were lost in grief. Maybe they were shaped by wounds you couldn't see. Maybe they had never been shown another way to speak, to love, to be human. Maybe they were running from themselves and you simply happened to be in the path. This is not a way of erasing harm. It is not permission for cruelty or injustice. It is a doorway to freedom, because whether they meant to or not, you have a choice: to carry their actions as a weight or to let them pass as wind. To define yourself by how others failed to love you, or to define yourself by how willing you are to forgive not for them, but for your own peace. Because blame is a rope too. It keeps you tethered to the moment of harm. You replay it, you grip it, you feed it with memory. You tighten it every time the anger returns, and like all ropes held too long, it begins to hurt the hands that hold it. You begin to hurt yourself with the story someone else left behind. But you don't have to. You can drop the rope. You can say, this boat came out of nowhere. It hit me, and it hurt. But it was not about me. I choose not to carry it anymore. And in that choice, you begin to feel what the monk felt. Not the collapse of identity, but the rising of liberation. Try this practice now. Close your eyes. Breathe in deeply. Now bring to mind someone who collided with your life in a painful way. Feel the old emotion rise. Now imagine them as a boat floating toward you on a lake. Ask yourself, is the boat empty? Can you see them not as the villain in your story, but as someone who may not have even known what they were doing? Someone adrift in their own current. Now breathe again and slowly let the boat drift past, not because it didn't hit you, but because you no longer need to chase it. In Zen, the ego is the part of us that insists, this shouldn't have happened to me. I deserve better. I must protect this identity, this story, this hurt. But the awakened heart asks, what would it feel like to be free of that story? To no longer take every bump as an insult. To no longer build yourself around how others treat you. To no longer need someone to blame. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you light. It makes you whole. So the next time someone crashes into your peace, pause. Before you react, before you shout, before you carry it too far, look closely. Maybe the boat is empty. And if it is, you have a choice: to be angry at a ghost, or to breathe, to smile, to let go, and return to your stillness. But before we move on, take one last breath here. Let the ripples settle. Let the story fade. There is nothing to defend. There is no one to blame. Only you. In the quiet boat on the water, after all the lessons on stillness, projection, grief, and surrender, we now arrive at a different kind of teaching. One that doesn't unfold in a moment of revelation or in the heat of emotion, but in slow, quiet practice. This teaching is not about what we feel or what we understand, but about what we tend to every day. It is about cultivation. It is about care. It is about learning to live life the way a Zen master tends to a garden, not with force, but with presence. This is the story of the Zen garden. At the edge of a small monastery in Kyoto, there was a garden tended by an old monk named Etsuo. The garden was not large. It had no rows of vegetables or bright flowers. Instead, it was a traditional karesansui, a dry Zen garden of stone sand and a few carefully placed moss-covered rocks. Every morning before dawn, Etsuo would rise and go into the garden. With quiet steps, he would pick up a wooden rake and begin to smooth the surface of the sand. He moved slowly, steadily pulling the rake in deliberate lines that spiraled, curved, and danced around the stones. Each movement was like a breath, each line like a thought smoothed and released. Young monks often watched him with curiosity. One day, a novice asked, "Why do you rake the same garden every day, master?" "The wind scatters the lines by afternoon." Etsuo smiled. "That is the point," he said. "I do not rake to create something that lasts. I rake to practice the art of care." The novice tilted his head. "But doesn't it frustrate you to do the same thing over and over, knowing it will be undone?" The old monk paused, looked up at the sky, and replied, "Frustration only comes when you mistake the lines for the purpose. The garden is not for permanence, it is for practice." This story is a quiet meditation on patience care and the often overlooked beauty of repetitive devotion. It's a teaching without fanfare, soft, deliberate, steady. In the modern West, we are conditioned to value what is complete, what is finished, what can be displayed and measured. We chase outcomes, milestones, trophies. A task is worthwhile, we're told, only if it leads to something enduring. We seek permanence, and we define progress by accumulation of wealth of knowledge of status. But in Zen, the worth of an act is not measured by its results, but by the quality of attention we bring to it. It's not about how much is achieved. It's about how present we are as we move through it. The lines in the sand of the Zen garden are not meant to endure. They are always undone. They are erased by wind, by footsteps, by time. The garden is not a monument. It is a mirror showing the state of our minds. Raking becomes a practice not of perfection, but of presence, an act of intention, a way to return again and again to the now, the moment, the body, the breath. There is no finish line, no applause, no need. And that is what makes it sacred. Zen reminds us that life is not something we master once and for all. It is not a summit to be reached, after which everything becomes easy. Life is something we tend to, gently, continually, one small mindful act at a time. Like caring for a garden, not because the garden will be perfect, but because we are shaped in the tending. What are the small, quiet acts you return to each day? Not because they bring you closer to some achievement, but because they ground you. It could be preparing tea, not to impress anyone, but simply for the warmth of the cup in your hands. It could be sweeping the floor, not to keep it spotless, but to feel the rhythm of the broom, the simplicity of the movement. It could be watering a plant, folding laundry, writing in a journal, tying your shoes. These are not distractions from your spiritual life. These are your spiritual life. Zen whispers. This too is practice. Each time you do them with awareness, with care, you are entering into a deeper rhythm, a slower one. You are cultivating not just cleanliness or order or completion, but patience, presence, compassion for the moment as it is. These acts teach us not to rush. They teach us to stay, to notice. And perhaps most importantly, they prepare us for impermanence. Because just like the lines in the sand, all things in life are temporary. The tea will grow cold, the floor will gather dust again, the flowers will wilt, our bodies will grow older, our projects will fade, our moments will pass. The wind always comes, but we do not rake to stop the wind. We rake to meet it with grace. This is the quiet revolution of Zen, not to control life, but to care for it. Not to force permanence, but to meet impermanence with kindness. The garden is not for control. It is for communion with nature, with stillness, with the present moment. And so we rake, we breathe, we begin again. Not because we must, but because we can. Because beginning again is its own kind of liberation. Because each act of care, no matter how small, is a way of saying, this moment matters. And in saying that often enough, the moment begins to say it back. Close your eyes. Imagine a simple Zen garden. There is soft white sand. There are smooth stones placed with intention. Now imagine yourself standing there holding a wooden rake. You begin to move it slowly across the sand. Feel the sound it makes. The resistance, the ease. You are not hurrying. You are not designing for display. You are just moving, just breathing. Now imagine the wind comes. It scatters your lines, undoes your work, and you smile because you understand the beauty was in the doing. Patience is not the ability to wait for results. Patience is the willingness to stay present when there are no results, when nothing seems to change, when the reward is simply the quality of your attention. Care too is not about perfection. It is about how gently you hold what is in your hands, be it a rake, a teacup, a child, or a sorrow. To live like this is to become a gardener of the moment, a quiet master of now, someone who does not rush past the ordinary but sanctifies it. And so when life feels chaotic or meaningless, return to your garden, whatever it may be, and rake, not to control, not to finish, but to remember that peace is found in the way we move through the world, not just in where we're going. Now breathe in once more, let your heart soften. But before we move on, take a moment to ask, what is your rake? What is your garden? And how will you care for it today? We've walked through gardens, drifted in empty boats, raked sand, and listened to silence. Along the way, we've touched themes of grief, surrender, patience, and presence. Now, in this final story, we return to the very heart of Zen, not as a concept, not as a belief system, but as a direct, wordless experience of reality. Zen has always been wary of too many words. It points not to scriptures, but to the awakening beyond them, the subtle yet profound realization of who and what we truly are beneath the layers of identity, fear, and thought. This last teaching from the life of the Buddha himself is known not for what was said, but for what was not. This is the story of the final flower. It is said that one day the Buddha stood before his followers to deliver a teaching. Thousands had gathered expecting words of insight, another discourse, another sutra, but the Buddha said nothing. Instead, he lifted a single golden lotus from the ground, holding it silently in the air. He didn't speak, he didn't explain. He simply looked at the flower and then at the crowd. The moment stretched long. The disciples waited confused. Some fidgeted, some grew restless. But one monk, Mahakashyapa, looked at the flower and smiled. The Buddha smiled back. He said only this, I have the true Dharma I, the marvelous mind of nirvana, the true form of the formless, and I now transmit it to Mahakashyapa. In that instant, Zen was born not as a set of rules, but as a lineage of direct transmission beyond words, beyond concepts, from mind to mind, heart to heart. This story is not about a flower, it is about awakening, about that rare moment when the veil lifts and we see clearly without needing an explanation, without analysis, without language. It is about a kind of understanding that doesn't arise from the intellect, but from something deeper, from stillness, from presence, from the very core of being. This is the wisdom that Zen points to again and again. Truth is not something to be gained through effort alone, nor solved like a puzzle, nor argued into existence. It is something we remember, something we uncover like sunlight already behind the clouds. It's not found at the end of a long road. It is what's been here the whole time, waiting for us to stop looking elsewhere. Zen calls this your original face, the pure, undivided awareness you carried before you were given a name, before anyone told you who to be, what to want, or how to measure your worth. It is the part of you that was never confused, never wounded, never separate. Not the body that changes, not the mind that wanders, but the space that holds them both. The clear, unchanging presence beneath all becoming. When the Buddha held up the flower, most people saw a plant. Mahakashyapa saw the entire universe. In the curve of a petal, he saw impermanence. In its color, he saw beauty. In its silence, he saw mystery. He saw the truth of suchness, that things simply are, and in their being, they are complete. And so he smiled, not because he understood in the usual way, but because he recognized something timeless, a truth that cannot be spoken, but only lived. Not understood with the mind, but remembered with the heart. Let this be your invitation too, to stop trying so hard to grasp enlightenment as if it were a possession, a prize, a badge to be earned. Instead, let it come to you gently, not as something to achieve, but as something to allow, something to receive, not as a concept, but as a moment, as a breath, as the flower that is already in your hands, waiting not to be dissected, but to be seen. So often we chase awakening as if it lives somewhere else. We imagine it at the top of a mountain, in the words of a master, in the silence of a monastery, in the stillness of retreat. We make it distant, sacred, separate from everyday life. But Zen whispers, look closer. The truth is not far away. It is beneath your thoughts, behind your constant striving, hidden in the quiet space between breaths. It is in the sound of rain, in the softness of your pillow, in the way a candle flickers. It is in the way your hands move when you pour tea. It is right here always. As the Buddha said elsewhere, all beings are already enlightened. They simply do not realize it. You don't have to become something else. You don't need to fix yourself first. You simply need to wake up to what you already are. And when you do, the flower will not be just a flower. It will be everything, and everything will be enough. Try this now. Close your eyes. Imagine the Buddha before you. In silence, he lifts a single flower. He does not speak. You do not need him to. You simply look. What do you see? What do you feel? Can you let go of needing a meaning? Can you simply allow the flower to be? Now imagine that the Buddha is not holding the flower. You are. And in your hands, you realize the flower does not need to explain itself to be beautiful. Neither do you. You too are part of this mystery. You too are enough just as you are. Zen awakening is not dramatic. It is not flashy. It is often a soft smile, a breath that deepens, a sudden stillness in the middle of a noisy world. It is a shift not in what you see, but in how you see. The flower didn't change. Mahakashyapa did, and so may you. Not by becoming someone else, but by remembering who you've always been. So as this journey nears its close, carry this final story gently in your heart. Let it bloom in your breath, in your eyes, in your attention to the smallest, most ordinary things. Because in Zen, there is no separation between the sacred and the simple. The final flower is every flower. The final teaching is every moment. The final truth is this: you are already home. You've journeyed with us now through 15 stories, each one a quiet doorway into the heart of Zen. We've sat by still ponds and raked silent gardens. We've watched the moon ripple on water and smiled at empty boats. We've listened to bells that do not ring and felt the presence behind the noise. We've grieved, let go, awakened, and returned again and again, always to this moment. What have these stories asked of you? Not to be perfect, not to understand everything, not even to remember it all. They've asked only one thing: that you be here, that you listen, not just with your ears, but with your whole being, that you breathe not just to survive, but to feel alive, that you see not through the lens of thought, but with the clear eyes of presence. Zen does not promise answers. It offers awareness. It doesn't ask you to escape the world. It invites you to meet it gently, openly, one breath at a time. So as this journey comes to a close, know this: you don't need to go anywhere to find peace. You don't need to change to be enough. You don't need to achieve to be free. The stillness you seek is not in the stories. It's not in the teachings. It is in you, already. Right now, you are the bell. You are the flower. You are the one who rakes the sand and the sand itself. There is nothing to add, only something to remember. So close your eyes, place your hand on your heart, and bow to yourself not as someone on the way to awakening, but as someone who is already whole, already home, already this moment. Let that be enough. Let that be everything. May you carry these stories like soft lanterns into the quiet corners of your life. And when the wind rises and the world grows loud, may you remember, you are the stillness beneath it all. You are the silent bell. You are the final flower. Thank you for walking this path with us. Be well, be present, be at peace. Sweet dreams.